My name's Will Powell. My 10-year-old son died in 1990 of Addison's disease. It was suspected 4 months before he died in the hospital that Dr. Dowie Evans worked. They ordered the ACTH test. They didn't do it. They didn't tell my wife or I that it was suspected. They communicated to the general practitioners that Robert was suspected of Addison's disease, that he needed the ACTH test, and that he should be referred immediately back to hospital if he becomes unwell. Between the 2nd of April 1990, 4 months later, and the 17th of April, Robbie was seen by 5 different GPs on 7 different occasions. He had all the symptoms of Addison's disease. We were told 6 days before he died that there'd be a referral to the hospital. The GP knew that Addison's was suspected. It's a condition that invariably results in death without treatment. He didn't tell us of the suspicion at that time. We knew nothing about it. Robbie was then seen on the 15th of April, the 16th and the 17th when he collapsed. The GP came to the house. He had dilated pupils and central cyanosis. And she said there was nothing wrong with him, although he'd been unconscious and lost his vision. She refused to send him to hospital. She went from there giving medication for what they said was a viral illness. Before the hospital, for help, I should have taken Robbie to hospital. Before the help of the hospital to be told that we couldn't bring him in without the referral letter. But that we could go to accident emergency if you'd have to wait a long period of time. The GP must be okay, but if you're worried, get him back out again. So we did. The GP came out. Robert had abdominal pain. She argued not to refer him. She eventually relented. She said she would. I got Robbie ready. She was writing a referral letter as I come down from upstairs after wrapping the child in his blanket. I said, have you ordered an ambulance? She threw the referral letter at me and said, take him by car. Whew. Sorry. Which I did. My wife and I took him. On arrival, Robbie stopped breathing and he died in front of me. Well, since then, I've been complaining about the care that you received. And unfortunately, it's been covered up for 35.5 years. I'd like to share with you some of the events. The cover-ups involved coroners, the pathologist, the NHS complaints procedures, the Welsh office, the Welsh Government, the police, the Crown Prosecution Service, and the General Medical Council. Robbie's case exposed the absence of a legal duty of candour. In the UK courts and in the European Court of Human Rights. If I may, I'll read to you what the European Court stated. Whilst it is arguable that doctors have a duty not to falsify medical records under the common law, Sir Donald said Master of the Rolls' duty of candour. Before Powell v. Olads, there was no binding decision of the courts as to the existence of such a duty. As the law stands now, however, doctors have no duty to give parents of a child who has died as a result of their negligence a truthful account of the circumstances of the death, not even to refrain from deliberately falsifying records. And that's what we were told. 2 criminal investigations by the local police, Dyfed-Powys, between 1994 and 2000, who incidentally retained the GPs as police surgeons, falsely claimed that there was no evidence of crimes which was supported by the Crown Prosecution Service in Wales. On the advice of the CPS, the GPs were provided with a letter of immunity to prevent any further or future prosecutions. However, due to my complaints, there was a third independent criminal investigation by DCI Pool between 2000 and 2002, which set out 35 suggested charges: gross negligent manslaughter, forgery, attempting to pervert the course of justice, and conspiracy to pervert the course of justice. In 2003, York CPS accepted that there was sufficient evidence to prosecute 2 GPs and the Secretary for forgery and pervert the course of justice. However, they evaded prosecution as a consequence of the passage of time, which has been caused by the cover-ups for 10 years, by the Welsh Office, the police, the CPS, many others, and the immunity letter that was given to them. Also in 2003, because of my persistence, there was an investigation into Dublin Powers Police, and they were found institutionally incompetent regarding their next investigations into Robbie's death. Following a 9-year and 5-month legal review that just finished last year, 2 King's Counsels, former Treasury Counsels, it was accepted that the earlier failures of the CPS was responsible for the doctors evading prosecution in the 1990s, and that my 2000 complaints against the CPS Wales were not adequately investigated. In response to the CPS's independent assessor of complaints' recommendation that there should be a remedy to address these serious failures, the Director of Public Prosecution said there is no such remedy available and closed Robbie's case. Not one person has been made accountable for the child's death. Not one doctor, not one police officer, not one CPS prosecutor. In 1992, the doctors publicly called my wife and I liars, distorters of the facts, and fantasists. In libel statements they put up in the 3 surgeries. The libel action took me 13 years as a litigant person to receive an apology and compensation. So I proved that they were the ones that lied, not my wife and I. I went to the Ombudsman. He was unhelpful in the 1990s. It was a complete waste of time. In 2002, I requested a subject access request. And in my file, we had Mr. Powell was a liar. He was vindictive. He was loud. He was aggressive. He was a streetwise alley cat. And he had a caveman approach. I eventually had an apology for those comments some 2 years later. When I was issued the proceedings in a civil case, when it went to the High Court, it went to the Court of Appeal, it went to the House of Lords, and it went to Europe, which I've just read out. Had my wife and I taken the £300,000 estimated compensation in 1996, a duty of candour, a legal duty, or the absence of it would never have been known if we planted the seed for that law, and yet we get no credit for it. The journalist never mentioned Robbie's case. Very rarely anybody mentions it. And what we did is we lost a beautiful child. I spent 35 and a half years campaigning, trying to help others so it doesn't happen again, although sadly it's happening today, which is heartbreaking for us. And Dr. Dowie Evans, well, as I said, Dr. Dowie Evans was one of 3 paediatricians in Morrison Hospital. He was an endocrinologist by all accounts. However, he claims he did not know that Robbie was suspected of Laveson's because his 2 colleagues did not tell him. He found out that Robbie died in his ward and in his department, and he did nothing about it. I later found out that he read a Guardian article in It was published in the 24th of December 1994 by Nick Davis, and it was a damning article. It mentioned the negligence, the cover-ups, the falsification of records, and apparently he read this and did nothing. In 1995, he involved himself with Robbie Powell's police. He contacted them because they were looking for a specific doctor while investigating Robbie's manslaughter. This was the investigation now when they covered up and ignored the evidence. Billy Evans wrote to the police asking to be involved. I've got no idea of whether or not he was involved, but what I do know is, in March of 1996, Billy Evans sent the GPs who caused the death of our son a supporting document about the lack of fault in their care of Robbie. Now, I have evidence from other medical experts that 4 of the GPs were grossly negligent and they were a contribution to his death. And the Dr. Forbes, the paediatrician at Morrison Hospital, was grossly negligent. And every doctor at Morrison Hospital who dealt with Robbie during the time he was suspected of Addison were also negligent. A letter that the hospital sent to the GPs that I read after Robbie died stated clearly the 3 things that I just said. 1, Addison was suspected. 2, that Robbie needed an ACTH test. And 3, to get him straight back to hospital immediately if he became unwell. I was devastated that day. It was 3 days after Robbie's death. I'd just been told he died of Addison's disease. I said, what the hell is this test? They suspected Addison's, he said. I said, it's a hospital. The hospital suspected it. We knew nothing about it. Well, I think anybody here will realise with that information and Robbie being seen on the occasions he was, there was something seriously gone wrong. I asked my best friend to witness the letter. I could not believe it. Back in 1980, we didn't have phones. We didn't have cameras available. I thought the best thing to do is get my friend down to the house. I told my friend what was in the letter. He said, what? He said, these doctors haven't got a defence will. I said, exactly, how on earth? And I knew then, because I looked up Addison's disease and found out that you have pigmentation of the skin. Robbie had it. TB could cause it, although rarer these days. Robbie had been in contact with TB twice. He had a BCG when he was 4 years of age. That could have obviously, in my view, not been a medical person, not been a doctor, but I thought TB, injection of TB, could that have caused the adrenal glands not to work? Anyway, my friend said, Will, you're better off if you could get hold of a professional who could come to this house with you, get the GP there again as you want, get the witness to look at the medical records, witness that letter, take a note of it, and at least then you should be okay. So I couldn't think of anybody other than an old reverend, a man of God, who lived 3 doors down from where I live. And he'd come to my house after Robbie's death, or my wife, my house, after Robbie's death, to tell me Robbie used to brush his dogs. And he said, I'm so sorry about him and what's happened. And if I could do anything for you, please let me know. Now, this man was an academic. He was a lecturer at Oxford University, as well as a reverend. So I had the Reverend Thomas to come to my house 3 days later, when I'd seen this letter. I didn't tell Dr. Keith Hughes it was, that the Reverend was there. I knew he would have objected. I told him to bring the medical records, which he did. When Dr. Keith, the Reverend Thomas came first, I put him in my front room. My sisters were all in the house. This is only now 6 days after Robbie's death. So my family was in the house. We were Glaswegians. We're quite aggressive, apparently. But my sisters, I told them, look, this is hard for us all. This doctor saw Robbie the day before he died. He's coming up here on his own. I don't want the 3 of us be asking him a lot of questions. You've got to be quiet, and you've got to let me speak to this man, because I know that it shouldn't have happened. And sorry, I get that wrong. That was the 3 days after the death, when I saw it, my sisters were in there. Beg your pardon. The day that I saw it for the first time, my sisters had come in, and I told them not to interfere. And sadly, when I asked the doctor, did Robert have to die? And he said, no. My sisters lost it, were breaking their heart, and quite upset, obviously, and I'd asked them to leave. But 3 days later, I've got the Reverend Thomas in the house. And the reason I mentioned that was because if my sisters had just been quiet, they'd have seen this letter as well. But they didn't. So the Reverend Thomas is waiting there with me. He's got his notepad. Dr. Keith Hughes comes in. Hello, Dr. Hughes, did Robert need to die? Oh, I'll have to be careful what I'm saying. The Reverend Thomas is taking notes. He said no, because he'd already told me that 3 days earlier. So I got the medical notes from him. I gave them to the Reverend. The Reverend noted the content of that letter. I still have his contemporaneous notes. He made an affidavit. He's made a statement. And I thought, we've got it. 6 months later, when I get the medical records, the Addison's letter no longer exists. And it's been denied ever since. If when I asked for the computer records in the hospital, in the event that some information would have been there, they deleted them all. They deleted the computer records, they falsified that, they falsified the referral letter, they falsified consultation notes, and not one of them has been made accountable. Thank you, I think that's about it. Cool.